Hey, Sadia, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jackie. How are you?
Very good, thank you. I'm so glad that we're actually here together. We've been talking for a couple of weeks about doing this presentation. Before we get started, I just want to tell everyone how I met Sadia, and then I'm going to put my PowerPoint up so everyone can see her bio and contact information. But my name is Jackie Harounian. I'm a partner in a family law firm. We're on Long Island, and I have done presentations of this sort, collaborating with financial professionals. And Sadie and I became connected, and we had a conversation and realized that we really have a very similar perspective in many ways regarding advising individuals, especially women from traditional backgrounds. And we're going to share some of those perspectives tonight. We have about an hour together. We have many people that are signed up on Zoom and many others that are watching us right now on Facebook. And I just want to say, if anyone wants a copy of this presentation or a replay, I'm happy to provide it. It will be on my Facebook page. And also we will be emailing it out along with the PowerPoint if anybody asks for it. So I am going to put up the name of our topic just so we can start with that. The topic is legal and financial planning for women. So this is not to say that some of this information won't be relevant to men. Of course it will be. I hope there are some men that are watching that are interested and might learn from this. But we are gearing it more towards women. And I think you'll find out why when we talk about some of the specific concerns that go on, especially for women in traditional religious and cultural relationships and communities. So I have here, if you have comments, you can leave them on Facebook or in the chat box here on Zoom. And the topic of our presentation is an honest conversation about the challenges facing women in traditional relationships. So we're going to go a little bit behind the scenes and talk about some of the motivations and some of the concerns and some of the challenges that face women in traditional relationships. I want to say at the outset that even though I am a family law attorney and I do help men and women that seek divorces and transition in their families, I am by no means promoting divorce, especially for people that are traditional and don't really believe in divorce or really think that it's something that's not in the best interests of their family or their community. But I will touch on some issues regarding divorce. I think it's important that an information be out there. The conversation that Sadia and I are going to have in a moment is really more about financial literacy and finding out how to empower yourself, whether you are single, married, or divorced or widowed. It really is for almost anyone that could use a little bit of help regarding financial literacy and empowerment. So here I have the contact information for Sadia and I. Sadia is a wealth advisor and I am a family law attorney. We are both very easy to reach. I'm going to ask Sadia to tell us a little bit about her background in a moment, and I'm happy to do the same thing for myself, but we are both reachable by phone. Our websites are up here. And in case you have a question that's too sensitive to share now, I know that you can reach either Sadia or me afterwards, and we'd be happy to guide you if you have some questions or concerns. So here we have the topics to be discussed. You will see they focus on lack of access to financial information, a very common problem for women that are financially dependent or in traditional relationships. We're going to talk about how to demystify tax returns and maybe even to get comfortable with investments and savings and budgets. These are all very, very important for women, whether they're the earners in their families or not. We're going to talk about financial control and domestic violence. These are unfortunately very common features in relationships across different cultures and across different socioeconomic groups, but are of particular concern in traditional relationships and in certain religious and cultural communities. We're going to talk about stigma and loss of status. That is certainly something that I see, and Sadia, you and I talked about it. The shame of being financially compromised if you're single, or the shame of a divorce, or loss of a spouse and having to support yourself. There are so many ways that there can be embarrassment and loss of status in a community, especially as a woman. And finally, I have shame and blame in gender roles. How does it feel to be in a relationship, even in a good marital relationship, where maybe the wife earns more? Maybe she is the one who handles the money. Is that okay in the relationship? Is it causing conflict? And what can we do to mitigate that conflict? So now I'm going to put up Sadia's bio. And Sadia, if you wouldn't mind, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do for your clients? And then we'll start, after I give my bio, we'll start going through the topics. First of all, thank you so much for being here. I've been really looking forward to presenting with you.
Thank you, Jackie. Thank you for having me. So guys, I'm Sadia Sindhu. I am a wealth advisor with contemporary financial planning. I started my career on Wall Street. I worked for a company called Thomson Reuters, about 20 years ago. So originally from New York, and originally started out working for a company that provided real-time market data. So been in the financial industry, but started on the technology side. I now reside in Florida, Jacksonville, Florida, and I've been doing financial planning for over 6-7 years now. Majority of my clients are physicians, attorneys, families, business owners, and pretty much what I do is I help them live their best life when it comes to their financial life, and really start by understanding their finances. Everyone is at a different pace, at a different level when it comes to their finances. It's certainly not cookie cutter. Everybody has their own special needs. So when it comes to financial planning, it's very specific, very catered to the individuals and their families. Where we discuss long-term, short-term goals, and then together we take actions on how to secure their financial future. There's different concerns, like I said, in different time periods of our lives. A young couple that just got married have different concerns than to someone who's been in a relationship for about 10-15 years, have had children, and then those that are now approaching retirement. So just looking at specifically understanding where they are in their lives, what their needs are, what concerns them, what keeps them up at night, and then just working our way towards, what we could do best when it comes to their finances. Aside from that, I have served on multiple boards. I've served on HOAs. I've been a president of my HOA. That's a story on its own. And I've served on the local Jacksonville Library Foundation, which helps bridge the gap of some of the funds that help some underprivileged neighborhoods within Jacksonville, and provides a lot of summer programs, reading programs. And I've also volunteered at a Mayo Clinic, and I'm a former Rotarian, and I've also been a financial educator for United Way Real Sense.
Wow, that's really, you do a lot, and you're an advocate, and that you use your voice in ways that really help other people. So I think that's really impressive. So I remember, Sadia, when you and I spoke, I think you said you're married and you have children, right? And
I do.
I'm married with 4 children. I think we both agreed that we have a lot in common culturally to some degree. I mean, my parents are Middle Eastern immigrants. I am first generation in the United States, but I would describe myself as someone who's quite traditional. And I think you agreed that you were too.
Likewise, my family, we come from South Asia. And so we are, we're pretty much, we are, I grew up in a very traditional household. I agree. I think we have a lot in common.
Yeah. And, you know, if you just take a lens, you know, widen the lens a little bit and look at what women in general have in common. I mean, there are exceptions, obviously, but I think in most households, women do have specific gender roles, especially ones that are mothers. And for the most part, until relatively recently, women had more of a helper role when it came to the finances. They were not necessarily taking the lead in meeting with accountants or reviewing tax returns, or making financial decisions. I think for even American women and Western women, it's very common to have this mindset that sort of my husband takes care of that, or it's not really my role to make financial decisions. And I can
Abs-
certainly understand that.
Right, absolutely. I think when we initially had our conversations, I think when we, when we are, if we're, speaking about, lack of access to financial information, if we're getting into one of the bullet points that we're discussing tonight, I think that growing up in a traditional household, regardless of, what your ethnic background is, I want to start by saying it is normal, for to have sometimes this lack of access, right? Would you agree? Because some of these things become like social norms, right?
I think it is a social and cultural norm, for women, you know, of a certain generation, but even for women that are younger, it's sort of expected and even desired that, you know, it's sort of this Cinderella fantasy that, you know, I'm going to be taken care of. I might have a job, but my money is not really the important money. My husband is the provider, and my domain is more the home and the children. I certainly feel that way. I mean, I think that my home is my domain, even though I am a partner in a law firm and I do work and I do bring in income. I think it's a very common mindset that really goes across all cultures, and again, all socioeconomic backgrounds. But I think in certain communities, and I would include Eastern cultures, uh, you know, and in certain religious groups, because I do have many clients that are very observant Jews or Muslims or Catholics or Christians. I mean, in certain communities, women really, just by design and by understanding and by expectation, they are in that secondary role, and that's the way they want it, and that's the way it is. And that's okay, except for the times when it's not okay. So
That's right.
we're gonna talk a little bit about that.
Right. And, as we get more and dive into this conversation, me personally, I've spoken to clients which will say I was told to just, be the good wife and not ask questions. Right. I was told to come in and play this role. And it was okay. I've had clients who said, up to a certain degree of their marriage, that they live like a queen. They were able to, travel the world and have certain things, but then there were other things that they had to forego, right? And then when the dynamics of the relationship changes, then you really start seeing things that have consequences for being able to accept these roles that we've been given, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I think it's very much a dichotomy, and I think we see it in our culture, and maybe young people see it in the dating world, where women want to be treated a certain way and protected, but at the same time, we want to have the right to call the shots in other ways. And I think that is okay.
Right.
I mean, in the context of a traditional marriage, which I do have, and which many of my friends and family have, I do see many models of that, where you have even husbands and wives both working, but still very traditional gender roles and expectations, and it works. When it starts to become a problem, is situations where you see that there's really a power and control dynamic, which can become abusive. One of our bullet points was financial control. It starts to become unhealthy when the wife either doesn't earn or doesn't have access to assets and doesn't have the ability or the right to ask for information or to have a voice when it comes to decision making. So you will see that she has no involvement in financial planning. She has no say in the budget of the household or how the parties save or whether they save at all. And you have sometimes situations where it's a good marriage, it's a loving relationship, everything's fine, but the husband makes very reckless decisions. He takes out debt. He's maybe not paying attention to, the budget. And he gets very offended if she tries to have a say. That's not okay. And this is the kind of thing where if earlier on in the relationship, there can be some communication, even if it's not the easiest thing to do, to have a conversation about the importance of making decisions together, and trying to make sure that the wife has a seat at the table and can use her voice in a way that benefits the couple. And this is something I would certainly encourage, in traditional relationships.
Absolutely. And I think when we talk about, with having said all of that, I mean, you raised excellent points. I think the way you can start really tackling this, some of the first steps that you can take is just by understanding what you have. So if you do have lack of access to information, the first thing you can do is first understand, what do you have access to, right? So when we talk about bank accounts, right? Like how many bank accounts are there? When we talk about the home that we're living in, right? Is it jointly owned? Understanding debt and whose name is the debt in, right? These are just information. This is just kind of on the surface first, just understanding what's out there. And then when you're looking at your primary residence, maybe there's rental properties, right? Maybe there's a business that's owned. Those are all things that are talked about. They're, most likely discussed in front of you. These are things that probably are in the open. So first, really understanding, what do you have? And then even like something like a credit score. A lot of people don't know, or they don't know their credit score until you need it, right? And a credit report can tell you if there's debt taken out, if there's debt in your name, if there's been payments that haven't been made. So all those things you could potentially have access to. And so, you've got to really just understand. So, and if let's just say, you have a job, your spouse has a job, you can look at the 401k accounts, right? There's IRA accounts, different type of retirement accounts. Those accounts come with beneficiaries. Do you understand who are the beneficiaries in these accounts? So just by starting out and understanding what you have and, what we're working with, they're just so important.
It's very important. I mean, I just want to stop you there. I'm putting our topics back up because this is what we're hoping to address today. A lot of what you said is so resonant for me as a family law attorney, because by the time people come to my office, it's almost too late. Not that some relationships can't be resolved, but when you have a situation where the wife, and it's almost always the wife, but not always, the wife who has no access to what's going on financially in the marriage, and maybe she agreed to that setup, maybe she didn't want access, but then suddenly she needs to know what's going on. It comes a point where sometimes it's too late to really fix things, let alone the relationship being fixed, because debts can escalate. Late fees, interest charges, tax debt can lead to foreclosure, bankruptcy. There are so many terrible things that often sometimes trigger divorce as well, that if we have a couple where both parties have access to all this information, it almost always leads to better outcomes. But I think what happens is There is sometimes in traditional communities this idea that if the wife knows too much, that somehow it's going to lead to her having too much financial independence.
That's right.
I think that is really sort of a mindset that's out there. And I think it is going to take women like you and me and others who show the benefits of having financial literacy, having women comfortable having access to this information, and helping their families make good decisions. And I think ordering the credit report is very important. As a matter of fact, I tell almost all clients they need to have a copy of it, because to live in denial and not have that information can lead to really unpleasant surprises later on. But I'm sorry, continue. I interrupted you.
No, absolutely. The thing is that it's aside from the credit report as well, like I said, I think, so if you're a parent, when your child is growing up, like we are so good in taking them for their annual physical, right? Like we make sure we have it on the calendar and they get a physical. I kind of compare this with, the having access to your financial information and looking at what you have is similar to getting a physical once a year, right? You want to be able to look at on a regular basis, you're doing a checkup of what you have, going back to the things that I mentioned as far as like just simple things as properties owned, income that's coming in, expenses that are going out, and understanding debt, right? Because as you know, when you are in a situation where you have a lack of access to information or lack of voice on the table when it comes to running the household or running the finances. I take that back. We take so much part in the running the day-to-day things that we do, right? Whether the food that we buy, that we put on the table, the clothes the children wear. However, we forego one of the most important things, which is securing our own financial future. So if there's one advice that I would give is first, just start by understanding what you have and consider it as your annual physical just from the beginning. Like, okay, you're doing a checkup on what do you have?
Yeah, I mean, can you tell us, like, if we were to have a hypothetical example of a woman who does work, but is not the breadwinner in her family, has a traditional background, is not looking to upset the apple cart too much, but what sort of approach would you take with her to help her do a financial plan? Assuming she's never, ever talked to anyone about money, is very nervous, doesn't even know what to ask. What might an initial consultation look like?
Yes, the initial consultation would be, what I call data gathering, right? It's really looking at, understanding what you have. So this questions that I came up with earlier is, let's start with assets, and assets could include bank accounts, your residence, your properties, your different forms of income, right? If you're saying traditionally, we're assuming this person is possibly a stay-at-home mom. Jackie, do you agree?
Yeah, someone who has very nominal income or stay-at-home mom. Yes.
Right. So, and I do get clients that come to me and they're in the situation where they are starting to question. There are things that have come up in their relationship where they feel, I'm a little bit worried about what the future holds for me. Right. I have clients right now that are kind of, not so sure if they're going to stay in this marriage, but they want to start by first understanding and starting to slowly separate the finances by, again, having that conversation. So the first thing is you sit down with an expert like myself, like yourself, and help us figure out what you have, right? And then also, like I talked about, credit score. If you haven't had a lot of income, haven't had a lot of years of working, or some sort of a financial footprint, you want to see what your credit report looks like, and your credit score. And so those are all really important things. And then, you know, when we start looking at how things are titled, so you know, when we have, you know, we know what we have when we were just talking about primary residence, but, you know, you may not know how the business is titled or how the rental properties are titled. So these are the questions that I will ask to start to have the individual understand what is their entire financial life looks like, and also like a snapshot of their monthly finances when it comes to cash flow and things like that.
You know, I see a lot of situations. I mean, again, when people are coming to me, they're really at a point where the relationship can't be salvaged in most cases. But I meet a lot of women that don't work, that are living in beautiful homes and having what seems to be extravagant lifestyle, fancy leased
Right.
car. You know, the
Right.
Amex charges always get paid. But when we sit down
Absolutely.
and we look at the home equity, it's almost non-existent. They have tapped out almost all of the equity in their home with a home equity line, which they saw nothing wrong with it. And, you know, they have other loans and they're taking out loans for college. And then they come to me and I have to be really the bearer of bad news, that they have willingly, you know, sort of been complicit in a plan that wiped out their assets and created debt. And so many of them express regret that they wish they had known, because again, you know, perhaps they would have spent differently. Perhaps they would have made different choices regarding their lifestyle had they known how close they were to the edge. And it's very, very distressing for them to hear. So I'll talk about New York family law for a moment, that under New York family law, if there's only $100,000 left in equity in the home, that's not enough for them to be able to carry the home after a divorce. They're only going to get a certain amount of child support. They're only going to get a limited amount of spousal support. And they're probably going to have to sell their home. And the rental market out here is really difficult. So it's very hard for women with children to start over and rent a home. And it's really a very hard landing for them to go from this huge lifestyle in a community to the point where they're going to have to start over with almost nothing, and they don't really have a job or a safety net to fall back on. So, you know, I feel very compassionate towards these women. The law is very, very harsh, unfortunately, for stay-at-home moms. But the question I have to ask is, how did you not know this was happening? You know, maybe you should have asked more questions. Maybe you needed to take a look at your spending. You know, it's always easier to spend than it is to save in many cases. But with the discipline and some financial planning and some coaching, it can really make a very big difference, and perhaps could even have saved the marriage. And then that's not even to mention, what are the children watching and learning about
That's
spending?
right. And when you bring up spending, I mean, you know, they haven't really budgeted anything, or because again, the lack of access, when you don't know how much you have, you may think there's like a bottomless bucket, right? Like if you really don't have a lot of control.
That, for a lot of these women, they have a suspicion that things are not great, you know, but as long as their credit card bills are paid, they almost live in denial. It's really like just with willful blindness, just sort of like not focusing on it and just praying that things will always be okay.
Right.
And living in denial is a big problem in a lot of relationships. People will stay in a not so great situation because they're afraid of the change that will occur when they leave. And so many people stay married, stay in relationships, just basically because they're afraid of change. I mean, getting back to the issue of domestic violence and financial control, domestic violence is not just assault and even verbal abuse. Financial control is a factor, especially in more affluent communities and households, where a woman can almost feel trapped in a lifestyle where she doesn't really have the control over it, can't really save money on her own, is really almost like on an allowance from her spouse who controls everything. And it's really a miserable experience, and they don't know how to get out of it.
Jackie, I'd love to add to this. I cannot tell you, I've had quite a bit of clients that would tell me and come from very affluent households where the money was controlled. They were given, so in the bank accounts, they may have had one bank account where the spouse was putting in just enough as to run the household or their pocket money. But you know, to your point earlier, when things are paid, you kind of do are living in denial, because you think, oh, well, and you never know what your limit is, right? Like, you know, if you have certain type of spending habits, you know, every time you might be pushing the limit and say, oh, wow, well, I could, you know, we can afford to do this too, right? So if you're bringing him home, say, let's just say if your spouse is making 500,000 and you guys are spending 501, it won't make sense, right? Eventually things are going to start to fall apart.
Yeah, and you know, the court's response to this, by the time people are asking a judge to make rulings regarding support, you know, I said before, the laws are quite harsh. The judge's response is, well, you know, you were part of this marriage, you were part of these decisions, and if you weren't, you should have been. And ultimately, you're left with the consequences of the financial decisions made during your marriage. And that includes what's reported on tax returns. If a household where cash wasn't reported, it didn't end up on the tax returns, that's not going to be a great outcome for someone looking for child support, because the income is not being documented. You know, or if there's tax debt or home equity lines of credit, as I mentioned before, or other types of credit card charges that just keep ballooning with interest payments, that for the most part is marital debt. A lot of times the same thinking of living in denial and feeling like I can't be responsible, you know, my husband takes care of all of that, that doesn't come into play in family law. For the most part, debts are shared equally, and assets are shared equally. And so it is something that, you know, I encourage women, again, whether you're single or married or facing a separation or divorce, you need to really have a full picture. That can only happen by taking an active role in financial planning and financial literacy. That's why, you know, Sadia and I are doing this presentation, to raise awareness about how important it is, no matter what your marital status is. And there are no dumb questions. You have to start at the beginning, write your questions down, take it to an expert who can help answer your questions, and be responsible for your own financial life and financial decisions that are going to affect you, your marriage, and your children, and your entire future.
Absolutely.
Sadia, can you speak a little bit more about you know, financial security, including insurance or retirement planning for women, especially?
Absolutely. You know, a lot of times when we look at, you know, securing our future, retirement over and over comes up, right? When I'm sitting down, whether it's a couple or an individual, one of the first things, you know, I tell them, name top 3 things that are concerning to you, and they will bring up retirement is always up there. You know, what can I do now? Or is it too late? Right. So figuring out what the future looks like, where you see yourself settling down. It's never too late to start taking steps into planning for retirement. you brought up insurance, and I know that insurance sometimes does take a part in divorce as well. So I think a lot of times with insurance, I have an insurance background. When I started financial planning, I actually started my career working for AIG, and then National Life. These are all companies that have been around for over 100, 150 years. And their focus is insurance, life insurance. And with insurance, it's like, you don't think about it until you need it. So many people don't understand it's not really your money that buys insurance, it's really your health. So the younger you are, the better it is. Many times you think about, you may have something that runs in the family, like something like diabetes or high blood pressure. I come from a group of people where high blood pressure is in the family. It runs in my family. Probably every person that's over the age of 60 is taking something for that. So the key is to think about what insurance can do, and it certainly plays a part in financial planning, whether it's if God forbid something happens to your spouse, right? If you are, especially in the times where you are a stay-at-home mom and you are solely relying on this breadwinner, I can't emphasize how important it is to have a peace of mind with some insurance. And whether it's to cover debt, whether it's to secure your personal future, whether it's to secure the future of your children. If something happens to your spouse tomorrow, who is going to pay for college? How are they going to go through their college expenses, living expenses until they come of age? So I'm a big advocate for insurance, and it certainly plays a big part in the financial plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a lot of people, including myself, there seem to be so many options, and it can feel overwhelming to really choose, the right vehicle going forward. So we have a couple of questions. One is I'm going to get to in a moment. The first question, though, is for you. And someone asked, how do you charge for your services? And how would someone go about working with you?
That's a great question. So I have a couple of options. One is I do charge for assets under management. So it depends on the amount that I manage. So after a certain tier, it starts to go down, but it is a annualized fee of 1.4% of assets under management. I also do a flat fee as well for those that want to be more involved and hands-on when it comes to their finances. So I do a consulting fee as well, but it's certainly catered to where the person are and where the person is as far as how they would like their financial planning to go. It certainly is ongoing. I do multiple reviews a year. I not only do my clients have me actually do the investment aspects for them, but I'm well versed when it comes to insurance and everything else that kind of touches their financial life. I will get a phone call that says, can I afford to buy this home? Can I've helped people refinance. They've called me instead of their mortgage person to help figure out, do the numbers make sense? So that's kind of a little bit about my my fee structure, but certainly reach out and we can, I do a complimentary consultation and do a complete financial plan. I don't charge for it because I know that usually they'll end up becoming clients, and then we kind of go from there.
Right. That's great. I encourage anyone that needs help or wants to get some advice to contact Sadia. I think she's very knowledgeable, and I've spent some time with you virtually at this point. I feel like you're really, really very caring and very serious about what you do, which I think is so important. We have a question from one of the people in the Zoom. Her name is Dominique, and she says, as someone who is dating, how should one approach the financial conversations around these things when in a committed relationship that's approaching marriage in a way that avoids some common problems? Oh my God, I love that question. I know exactly how I
Great.
want to answer it from a family law perspective. But first, Sadia, why don't you answer it in terms of a financial planning perspective?
Absolutely. So then the first thing I will say is, my dear, first get to know your own finances before you get into, um, you know, before you commingle the finances. I cannot emphasize enough going back to understanding what you have, understanding what your individual goals are, understanding your debt. You know, a lot of times, you know, there are people, especially now with Gen Z and maybe some millennials as well, you know, you start to see where people are hesitant when they are, you know, getting into a committed relationship before they fully understand each other's finances, and especially when it comes to debt. So my advice would be is going through a process with, whether it's with a professional like myself or Jackie, to sit down and understand, what does your financial look like, financial life looks like as an individual.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything you said is exactly right. You never want to get into commingling finances with a spouse without having some understanding before you come in. There can be some very unpleasant surprises. So first of all, you want to know, are you compatible with regarding spending and saving? Can you agree on common lifestyle decisions and expenditures? Because those can be a very big source of conflict. But I think also there should be transparency. I mean, are you going to be able to share information regarding how much you earn? I mean, maybe even take a look at their tax return. Are you going to be honest about debts that you each have, including student loans? That's incredibly important. And I'm going to take it one step further and recommend that people sign prenups, because prenuptial agreements are very, very common with young people. You don't have to be wealthy to benefit from one. A prenuptial agreement is almost like insurance, which we talked about before, because it's going to really remove a lot of the risk of litigation. It's going to make it very clear that assets you owned before the marriage belong to you and can't be claimed later on. A lot of times people will argue about debt. I mentioned student loans, also credit card debt that existed before the marriage. People will not necessarily reveal how much they're paying for child support or spousal support for a first marriage. This can create tremendous conflict. And also, if someone owns a home before they get married, or they own a co-op, they're not necessarily going to put your name on the deed. But even if they do, under the law, they would be entitled to some what's called a separate property credit for the value of that asset before the marriage, or the value of retirement assets before marriage. So there's all the good reasons in the world. If you're not going to get quite to a prenup, which I recommend that you do, but if you can't
Right.
prenup, you should have a full conversation about the assets you each have, the debts that you each have, how you spend, and how you save, and whether you're going to have common saving goals to save up and buy a house. What's important to you both. A lot of people ask me, should you have one joint account? Should you have separate accounts? I think you have to work that out and discuss that. I think there should be a joint account so that you can pay bills together, but maybe there need to be separate accounts too, so you can have some privacy. And there has to be transparency, because money problems, if they're kept a secret, will absolutely cause a problem in the marriage later on. There has to be transparency. And if you've made mistakes, or if there's, a gambling debt or some financial issue that crops up, talk about it and work it out, and you'll have a healthier relationship. What I see also that people fight about is inherited money. Sometimes it goes into joint names. Inheritance is never marital property, but people make the mistake of putting their spouse's name, and sometimes that causes arguments. So a good discussion, even better yet, a financial agreement, is going to resolve almost all financial problems in marriage, and hopefully avoid, ending the marriage, which is almost always the goal. No one walks down the aisle thinking one day I'll get divorced. But you want protection in some cases. And the divorce rate, I think, has dropped to like 35%. The divorce rate has dropped. People are always surprised to hear that. It used to be as high as 50%. But the reason why the divorce rate is dropping is because people are marrying later. And higher age of marriage So this is sort of against what our communities recommend, because in my community,
Right.
the younger the better. But
Right.
actually getting married a little bit later with some assets and education usually means you'll choose a better partner, a more educated and financially stable partner, someone with a little bit more maturity, and that means probably a lower divorce rate. So the millennials are doing pretty well when it comes to the divorce compared to older generations. And you know, young people are more transparent, and they are more equality minded, you know, when it comes to sharing expenses and being fair. And in a lot of relationships, both people are working, and it's definitely a different paradigm than, you know, older generations. Dominique, I hope that answered your question. Um, we're kind of coming to close to the end of our talk here today. Sadia, I'm going to give it back to you. Are there any other tips you have for women to get better control of their finances?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, you have you have to start getting involved in your finances, um, you know, of your household, your income. I think when you're ignoring your money, um, and you're essentially ignoring your financial future, right? And this can have, dire consequences. I mean, if you're working and like we talked about, or your spouse is working, but let's just say you have a job and you may not be the primary breadwinner, but you know, but you're leaving your financial future in someone else's hands. So when we do talk about consequences, we've talked about, a divorce. I mean, but there could also be, God forbid, like an illness or premature death. We have seen, obviously, with COVID, we all know someone that has lost someone due to COVID, right? And so those are all the reasons why I think that I want to emphasize why women need to start paying attention, start having a conversation. I was reading a statistic where I think it said, 65% women are very much concerned about their financial future. And 8 out of 10 women do not feel comfortable having conversations with someone about their finances. So there's definitely a lot of void there where we need to start educating ourselves. And I think with Jackie and I, we want to promote financial literacy, financial education. And so, so I think that if one thing that you can take away from today would be to, just really get involved and have a team, right? Build a team of professionals, starting with an advisor, an attorney, a CPA, and have them figure it out, right? This stuff is complicated. It's not, it gives us anxiety because it's things that we're so busy doing other things. This is one less thing that you want to figure out. So, surround yourself with a strong team and get involved and start having that conversation and put a plan into place.
Yeah, no, I love that. I would like to reduce the stigma of women talking about money. We belong in that conversation. We shouldn't be afraid to discuss it, and our partners should not be afraid if we want to have more of a voice and make some decisions. All the statistics show that women are very good when it comes to making investments. In fact, we have just as good results as men do, if not better. Women tend to be more conservative investors. Men can be a little bit more attracted to risk. But there's nothing wrong with that, right? So I think women, we need to get more comfortable, make it okay to talk about money, to plan for our financial futures, to order our credit reports, look at tax returns, get our names on the title to the house, speak to advisors. It should be natural. It should be something that's on our to-do list, and then we'll get it done, because that's what women do. We put things on our list and we get it done. Another
That's
thing
right.
from a legal standpoint is having a will, and to give a thought to financial planning and estate planning. And family law does encompass those things too, which really are a must for anyone who has some money and dependents, whether they're your own children or other members of the family. By midlife, I would say, even if you're in good health, there's really no bad reason to sit down with an attorney and talk about an estate plan, signing a will, a healthcare proxy. I think that's on everyone's minds right now during the pandemic. There's certainly a lot of reasons why people are concerned about their health and their parents making financial decisions. My firm has an estate planning department. We're doing many wills and trusts and estate plans for our clients and for their parents. And this is just another recognition of women's gender roles. Not only are we taking care of our children, we're often taking care of our parents.
That's
And
right.
it's not easy to talk about money with your parents, especially in certain cultures and communities. It's stigmatized. I mean, women are not supposed to talk about money with their parents. They're supposed to keep their mouths shut and let other people take care of money. But it doesn't have to be that way. And we can really help our families, our loved ones, make much better decisions. And there's a lot of information out there on the internet. I encourage everyone listening to really try to make a plan, meet with an advisor. As I said, I certainly recommend Sadia. She's wonderful and very responsive. I'm actually going to put up her contact information one more time. But it really just does start with trying to take ownership of your financial life and make the best decisions you can for yourself and for your loved ones. I want to thank everyone for participating today. Thank you for submitting your questions. I do have Sadia and my contact information up on the screen right now. And Sadia, I really want to thank you. I knew that we would have an interesting discussion, and we certainly did. And I want
Thank you, Jackie.
Thank you so
for
much.
having me.
My pleasure.
I just want to add that if you guys, you guys have my contact information, feel free to reach out, send me an email, drop me a text. You can certainly follow me on Facebook or LinkedIn. Also, my website is sadia-sindhu.com. I have also, I do podcasts. I try to get out an episode once a week. And with the holidays, there were some weeks that may have been skipped, but I'm also on Spotify. So it's Simply Successful with Sadia Sindhu. But
God, I love that title. I'm going to go check it out. The podcast is Simply Successful with Sadia Sindhu.
Yes, and you can find it on Spotify. But if you go on my website, you can click on the podcast, and all of the podcasts, previous ones are available there.
I will definitely check it out. Thank you for mentioning that. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for attending. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you, Sadia.
Thank you so much, Jackie.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.